Influencer culture is out of control, and I feel like recent internet discourse has all kind of pointed to the fact that the influencer era is maybe coming to an end or maybe evolving into something different from what we know it as now. I want to talk about why we're starting to lose trust in influencers and why, if they're going to fit into the future, they need to evolve. Hi, my name's Katie. I talk about sustainable fashion discourse and also how to bring sustainable fashion into your wardrobe. If that sounds good to you, then subscribe, like this video, and let's get into it. Before we start, yes, I'm going to mention the underconsumption trend. I feel like maybe that's become quite saturated on the internet now, but this topic is very pivotal to underconsumption core. However, I want to bring the discussion further than just what the internet is saying and look at how the underconsumption core trend fits into a wider societal shift that I'm seeing towards the influencer era being over or changing. So I guess we should do a brief history of influencer culture. It started back in the 2000s with bloggers being all over the internet and becoming a sense of authority, at least in the fashion industry. We saw a lot of bloggers start to get invited to catwalk shows and their influence just generally growing. I think you can definitely call bloggers the first influencers, but it wasn't until YouTube started to grow in popularity and YouTubers like Zoella came about that influencing really exploded and seemed to be a bit more of a viable career choice. I'm pretty sure most of us know who Zoella was. She was the OG YouTube fashion influencer, at least when I was growing up. She managed to reach over 10 million subscribers on the platform, launched her own brand, and put out a book deal, along with a whole bunch of other impressive stuff. Pretty soon after, we saw the rise of Instagram influencers, and maybe one of the best examples of this is Chiara Ferragni, who went from a fashion blogger to doing runway shows and launching her own fashion brand. And for a few years, Instagram really was the home of influencers. But then in 2019 and into 2020 with the pandemic, TikTok influencers exploded. They brought a whole new vibe to the influencer industry. Probably the most well-known influencer on TikTok is Charli D'Amelio, who was the most followed person on the platform from 2020 to 2022 and also had a ton of brand deals, pretty much cultivated what it means to have a brand deal on TikTok. She was working with a lot of well-known brands, put out her own book, and also put out her own products like a clothing line and a fragrance collection. So although, like I've just said, influencing really only started to become a thing in the past decade or so, it's quickly grown into one of the most effective forms of marketing. And we need to talk about why that is if we're going to talk about why influencer culture is starting to crumble. Influencer culture relies on parasocial relationships, which is defined by a one-sided relationship where one person puts in a lot of emotional energy, interest, and time into this relationship, and the other party, the influencer, doesn't know that this person really exists. One of the reasons influencer culture has become so effective is because us, the consumers, look to influencers as a source of education. Apparently, the most popular kind of influencer content is how-to videos, which I guess isn't that surprising. Influencers like Nara Smith have found a quick rise to fame through showing us how to create recipes in a very aesthetic way. And because a lot of influencer content seems so genuine, it seems very authentic compared to the marketing we were used to from brands where it was very obvious they were trying to get you to buy a product, a lot of us were viewing their content and not asking ourselves, are we being sold something? Obviously, TikTok in particular was quite an informal platform when it started. It was a lot of entertainment, but it was also a lot of genuine recommendations from people. And like I've said in my TikTok shop video, TikTok realized this and capitalized on it in order to turn their platform into a dangerously effective shopping machine. Nowadays, almost every influencer has an agenda when they're creating content for you to consume. They're giving you product recommendations that have been sponsored by the brand, or they're linking their outfit to their Amazon storefront or TikTok shop for you to buy. So let's talk about what's changed and why I think there's a societal shift going on towards influencers. Obviously, we need to talk about underconsumption core trending, or as some people call it, normal consumption core. It feels like recently there's been a whole spat of trends that are centered around anti-consumption.
I've fallen down a little bit of a rabbit hole recently, and now I can confidently say that capitalism and consumerism are ruining our brains.
Underconsumption core was arguably the most popular version of this. People were calling out others for this overconsumption that social media in particular has been pushing. They were questioning their own buying habit. And for a couple of weeks at least, the internet was a really nice place to be on. Before that, you had de-influencing trending earlier in the year. We've also had discourse around outfit blindness and how influencer culture has ruined what it means to have a good outfit. And I guess the one thing all of these trends have in common, other than the fact that they're all questioning our current buying habits, is that they're trends. People who are pessimistic about underconsumption core said that it would go away within a few weeks and we'd be going back to our normal behavior. Or it was just a rebrand of the very popular minimalism aesthetic. And others were saying that people participating in the underconsumption core trend were merely just doing that, participating for online views, but they would quickly go back to their old consumerism habits once it was no longer such a talking point.
When you romanticize underconsumption, like, oh my God, there's this woman that only uses 5 luxury makeup products, that's who I want to be, you're creating a fantasy life. And what that means is you are going to take the easy way out. You're going to say, well, I just need one good bag that I can wear every single day. So I'm going to get rid of all the bags I have and buy one perfect bag. Guess what? You just consumed. And that one bag will not be enough.
But I think the fact that this trend seems to keep coming back recently, no matter how much it's been rebranded, is a sign that there's a very slow, sure, societal shift. And recent studies seem to agree with me. One such study from 2024 went into why there's been a rise in de-influenced consumers that are choosing not to purchase things from social media. The top reasons given for why people aren't shopping on social media was that 1, it promotes overconsumption, and 2, they don't trust influencers who are pushing products. I think the underconsumption core trend was a peak in the wave that has been consumers waking up to social media's reality. Very poetic, I know. But so many people are waking up to the fact that fashion seems to revolve around consumption now, rather than enjoyment or self-expression, or even just something to wear.
Specifically, influencers who say they love fashion, but then only do fast fashion clothing hauls like every week. That's where I'm like, do you actually like fashion, or do you just like buying stuff?
Trend culture on social media is out of control. And I don't think it's one trend that's necessarily tipped the boat, but the culmination of how many trends were pushed in even just one season, and the amount of influencers who call themselves influencers but are really just pro-consumers who are influencing you to also consume. The fashion culture that influencers are pushing doesn't even feel real anymore. And I think this was really brought to attention with the outfit blindness discourse from earlier in the year. It was people critiquing social media outfits as being very online and not something you would necessarily wear in real life.
I don't necessarily hate this trend, but I do think, especially the white ballon skirt, the more I see it, the more I think it sort of looks like a very big diaper.
It feels like today's fashion influencers are just influencing other influencers. So many people who call themselves fashion influencers online are really just following other fashion influencers' trend cycles and what brands are partnering with them to push, and trying to pass all of that off as must-haves for you and me, regular consumers, so that they can make money off affiliate links. We all know this, but it feels like our reliance on parasocial relationships with influencers, with celebrity personalities, has blinded us to this fact until pretty recently.
Is anyone just over the era of influencers recently? Like, I know we want more relatable people and we've always been talking about that recently, but I'm just like, I can't do it anymore.
We have to start treating influencers as a brand, pretty much, since they are their own brand. And I think we need to encourage change in the people that have made consumerism their personality, their personal brand, like the people that are constantly doing shopping hauls, since this normalization of consumerism is just dangerous. But more than that, I think it's just out of touch in today's world. The climate crisis and the economic crisis across the world are both factors into why I think the influencer era is ending or shifting. I don't think I'd be alone in thinking that my social media has become more and more detached from reality as I see the headlines on the news and see what's happening in the world, and then I scroll on my phone and see someone doing a £500 Shein haul. How are you supposed to engage in influencers' content and shop their affiliate links when it feels like the world is ending? And one thing I think we need to keep in mind here is that there's also an opposite mindset currently happening. People are using shopping as a distraction tactic from what's happening, which I've talked about quite a lot on this channel. And I've also linked to the rise of buy now, pay later schemes. One of the other reasons I think is bringing on this influencer shift is the apps themselves. I've spoken about how TikTok has changed from a platform that was mainly focused on entertainment and dancing and authentic content into a consumerism machine. And that was largely due to TikTok themselves rewiring their platform in order to push TikTok Shop. Even though this has largely been really effective and the number of people shopping on TikTok Shop has increased dramatically since it was launched, it's also led to a really negative sentiment on the app of people feeling like they're being advertised to all the time. I think we also need to talk about what it is the influencers are pushing and how that's led to us distrusting them. Influencers are intricately linked to fast fashion, and the quality of the stuff they're pushing on you is often the worst it can be. At least in my social media algorithms, I've seen a rise in people wanting more from fashion, wanting to get away from the 100% polyester clothes and towards something that will last. And with the rise of this sentiment, it makes sense that people are pushing back against influencers who are still peddling the cheap quality crap from Shein and other fast fashion brands. Obviously, we can go back to the underconsumption core trend here as well and make a link between this trend rising and a lot of people questioning their consumerism and people becoming more and more distrustful of influencers who are pushing the opposite rhetoric still. I've seen an increasing number of thought pieces and YouTube essays talking about how social media personalities are becoming increasingly less relatable. Influencer fatigue is a term that describes people tired of how glamorized social media is online by these select few. And don't get me wrong, I don't think there's ever going to be a point in social media where influencers are not a thing. Obviously, the sentiment shift I'm talking about is in the beginning stages. I'm by no means saying that everyone feels this way or, by next year, we're going to have eradicated influencers completely. But I do think there's going to be a growing number of people that stop paying attention to them or start demanding more from them if they do want to keep our attention. And that begs the question, how will influencers evolve if they want to keep their audience? One of the first points where I started to see this shift towards a new influencer era was when internet personalities stopped calling themselves influencers and started calling themselves content creators. I looked online for a very clear definition of content creator versus influencer. It seems the generally accepted definition is influencers are just trying to sell you something, selling their personality, and content creators are providing a form of education or entertainment, but also selling you stuff at the same time. I feel like there's almost negative connotations with calling yourself an influencer online now. One article I found talking about this sentiment shift suggested that content creators don't prioritize making money or gaining fame from their content. They supposedly have a different purpose, whatever that may be. The same article suggested that very few people now feel comfortable calling themselves influencers. And maybe it's because content creation sounds a lot more professional. It sounds like you have a bigger meaning to your content rather than just getting people to buy something. And a little disclaimer here, I would pretty comfortably call myself a content creator, probably first and foremost a journalist, but normally what I do say in my bios is sustainable fashion journalist and content creator. I wonder if in a few years the term influencer might be almost phased out altogether, as traditional influencers scramble to put themselves forward as more of a personality than just simply trying to sell you stuff. But it doesn't mean that content creators aren't still trying to get you to buy. What it might mean is that we're more susceptible to their ads, and therefore the ads are very mixed in with that content and we might not be as on the lookout for it, or we might perceive value in what the person is saying and be even more likely to take their recommendations, which obviously isn't a bad thing if the creator is doing their due diligence and checking the brands they're working with. But if they're taking every single brand deal they can, then that's a bit worrying. One thing for sure is that brands are pivoting shifting to working with content creators over influencers. They might still be the mouthpiece for brands and trends, but maybe with a more cinematic or educational or inspiring approach. And to be pessimistic, maybe brands are prioritizing working with these kind of creators because they can get away with the advertising feeling more natural and less like an advert, so it gets past our barriers quicker. Information I found online show that consumers definitely prefer content creators who have something more to offer than just shopping recommendations. And I think, again, this point can be proven by another trend, which is the rise of the authentic influencer. The general sentiment online, from what I've seen, has shifted towards influencers being labeled as a bit more distrustful, especially those with a bigger following who want to capitalize on their fame. And people are starting to prefer micro-influencers, or people who feel a bit more genuine, who offer you more of a glimpse into their life maybe, or their content isn't quite as aspirational and poised. Although calling yourself an authentic influencer is definitely not authentic, and you shouldn't do that if you're a creator, apparently. One case study I kind of want to mention here is Emma Chamberlain. She was again one of the OG YouTube influencers who's definitely held on to her fame as she's grown and as social media has progressed. And maybe one of the reasons for this is because her personality comes off as quite authentic. Although there's a lot of people saying that Emma Chamberlain is now no longer relatable, now she's working with more luxury brands, she's going to bigger events, I think she still brings the same personality, the same vibe, which is part of what her authenticity was at the beginning. Not that I'm a massive stan or anything or know so much about her, but just the general vibe that I get off as a casual watcher is that she's retained the same approach that she did when she started. One interesting TikTok I found was someone talking about an influencer who comes across as very authentic. A lot of the comments of the TikTok were praising this creator who is actually an OF model and technically a big S worker, but it seems like her community finds it so refreshing that she doesn't do a lot of brand deals or affiliate links. Most of her free to view content is very authentic, very her living her life. And maybe this is what we're going to see more of. One other case study I kind of want to look at is influencer trips. I don't know who the first brand was to fly influencers out to a very glamorized location and ply them with free stuff and free food and free accommodation in return for posting about their products or their new line or whatever it is they were trying to promote. But it's gotten pretty old pretty fast on social media. You had the Shein influencer trip that a lot of people were calling out the creators for as inauthentic and a very staged version of what Shein wanted to promote, which was their ethical supply chain. And throughout all of that drama, a lot of people were talking about how the creators should have been questioning what was being fed to them by the brand. You also had the Tarte influencer trip, which had a lot of backlash too, because of how opulent the trip was and because of how glamorized it was and how consumers felt so removed from that lifestyle that they weren't resonating with the content and therefore weren't likely to buy the brand. So is it just that we're getting tired of people's lavish lifestyles being portrayed as relatable because it's on our phone screen? Are we getting tired of people cosplaying as celebrities whilst also trying to appear authentic and in touch with their audience who definitely aren't on a brand trip sitting on a yacht? I think definitely yes, but maybe we're also just tiring of consumerism and every single influencer who's pushing that, no matter if their content is a bit more relatable. Like I said, the state of the economy right now, the state of global warming, and just generally society feels quite downtrodden right now. Feels like we don't have space in our minds to be worrying about what new lipstick to buy. And I wonder if this will continue until things generally improve, or whether we'll see a new brand of content creator that work this into their message somehow, or even regress back to very, very small audiences, very niched, very like, this is a genuine product recommendation that I still use. Buy it or not. If you want to buy it, here's my link, but don't feel pressured. Maybe that message is going to become a lot more popular. But at the same time, I don't think capitalism would allow that to happen. So I don't really have the answers, but I think it'll be interesting to see. I'd love to know what you guys think about this topic. And thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.